They cost thousands of dollars. They're built with the latest technology. They monitor every inch of space, detect movement in complete darkness, and can alert authorities within seconds. Modern security systems are considered the pinnacle of human protection, trusted by governments, military bases, and billion-dollar corporations alike. But here's what nobody is telling you. A group of warriors armed with nothing more than wooden spears, animal hide shields, and centuries of ancestral knowledge could walk right through them. Not around them. Through them. In 2006, a helicopter carrying Indian Coast Guard personnel flew over North Sentinel Island to check on survivors after a tsunami. The Sentinelese, a tribe completely isolated from the modern world, responded by firing arrows at the aircraft. There were no cameras they feared. No alarm they couldn't silence. No motion sensor that understood how they moved. The helicopter retreated. These weren't superhuman beings. They were people who understood something modern security designers never accounted for: the system is only as strong as the assumptions it's built on. Modern security assumes power grids stay active. It assumes its sensors are smarter than the intruder. It assumes the threat will behave like a modern threat, identifiable, registered, predictable. Tribal warfare makes none of those assumptions. Tribal scouts have spent lifetimes reading terrain that no camera can fully capture. Their movement patterns evolved over generations to avoid detection by predators far more instinct-driven than any algorithm. Their communication is silent, layered, and completely off any digital grid. And here's the question no security engineer wants to answer. What happens when the threat you're facing has never been inside your system, not even once? To understand why modern security systems would fail, you first need to understand what they were actually built to stop. Every camera angle, every motion sensor radius, every facial recognition algorithm, all of it was designed with a very specific kind of threat in mind. A threat that carries a phone, that leaves digital footprints, that was once photographed, fingerprinted, or flagged somewhere in a database. A threat that operates within the same technological world the security system was built inside of. That's the foundation. And it has a crack running straight through the middle of it. Tribal combat doctrine, if we can call it that, developed not over years, but over thousands of years. Long before walls existed, these communities were solving the same fundamental problem that security engineers wrestle with today: how do you protect your people from a threat you cannot fully see? Their answer wasn't technology. It was something far more difficult to replicate: total environmental integration. Tribes like the Dani of Papua New Guinea, the Maasai warriors of East Africa, or the forest communities of the Amazon didn't just live in their environment. They became part of it. Movement was trained to mimic the natural rhythm of the terrain. Breathing patterns were controlled. Footsteps were placed, not taken. And reconnaissance wasn't a pre-mission task. It was a lifelong practice. A Maasai warrior undergoes years of training before he is considered battle-ready. That training doesn't happen in a gym or on a firing range. It happens in the wild, learning how predators move, how prey reacts, how silence can be weaponized. Now ask yourself, what sensor was built to detect that? Modern security systems are reactive. They respond to stimuli. But they can only respond to stimuli they were programmed to recognize. And here lies the deepest flaw: they were never programmed for this. The threat the engineers forgot wasn't fictional. It was just ancient. What happens when your facial recognition database returns 0 matches? When your motion sensors read animal? When your backup power gets cut before a single alert fires? That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what would happen. And by the end of this, you'll understand why. Here's where it stops being theoretical. Let's walk through what an actual encounter would look like, not in a movie, not in a video game, but based on documented tribal combat strategies, recorded behavioral patterns, and the known technical limitations of modern security infrastructure. The first thing that happens isn't an attack. It's observation. Tribal warfare almost universally begins with extended reconnaissance. Not hours. Sometimes days. Warriors study entry points, guard rotations, lighting patterns, and environmental blind spots with a patience that no modern security protocol is designed to outlast. Security systems are built to detect action. Tribal scouts are trained to delay it, indefinitely, until the moment is perfect. Now consider what your average perimeter security system is doing during those days. Cameras are cycling through their standard rotation. Motion sensors are resetting after every bird and every gust of wind. Guards are settling into routine, the most dangerous state any human protector can occupy. Routine is a vulnerability. And tribal combat doctrine has always known this. The Yanomamo people of the Amazon, documented extensively by anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon, practiced a form of raid strategy called nomahori, a carefully timed strike designed to exploit the exact moment when a settlement's awareness was lowest. Dawn. The transition between guard shifts. The moment after a false alarm resets everyone's attention. Sound familiar? It should, because modern military strategists identified the exact same windows of vulnerability. The difference is that tribal communities arrived at this knowledge centuries earlier, through survival rather than strategy rooms. Then comes the disruption phase. Before a single warrior crosses the perimeter, the environment itself is used as interference. Animal sounds are mimicked to mask movement. Natural debris is used to obscure ground sensors. And if power infrastructure exists, it is targeted first. Silently. Precisely. A security system with no power isn't a security system. It's an expensive collection of dark screens. And in that darkness, they move. But let's go deeper. Because the physical failure of the technology is only half the story. The other half is human. Every security system, no matter how advanced, ultimately depends on the people operating it. And those people carry something tribal warriors have spent generations learning to exploit: predictable psychology. Modern security personnel are trained for modern threats. They're trained to respond to alerts, follow protocols, escalate through proper channels, and above all, trust the system. That trust is their greatest vulnerability. When the system says everything is clear, they believe it. When a sensor resets after a false alarm, they log it and move on. When communication drops for 30 seconds, they assume a technical fault before they assume a breach. This isn't negligence, it's conditioning. It's what the training produced. Tribal raiders understood psychological conditioning long before the term existed. The deliberate false alarm, triggering a sensor, pulling back, waiting for the response to normalize, is a documented pattern in historical tribal conflict. It appears in the raiding strategies of the Comanche, widely considered among the most tactically sophisticated mounted warriors in recorded history. They would provoke a response, observe how the enemy reacted, identify the decision-makers, and then strike during the recovery window, when defenses were lowered and confidence was falsely restored. This is not primitive thinking. This is behavioral warfare. And here's what makes it so devastating against modern systems specifically: modern security is designed to be efficient. Efficiency requires pattern recognition. Pattern recognition requires repetition. And repetition, by its very nature, creates exploitable rhythm. Tribal combat doctrine doesn't just find the rhythm. It uses the rhythm against you. There's another dimension that rarely gets discussed: terrain manipulation. Tribal communities fighting on familiar ground have a lead advantage that no satellite map, no thermal imaging drone, and no topographical software can fully replicate. They know where the ground is soft enough to silence footsteps. They know which trees carry sound and which ones absorb it. They know where a natural hollow creates a dead zone for radio frequencies. This knowledge isn't stored in a database. It lives in the body. Passed down through experience, through childhood, through survival. No security contractor can purchase that. And when you combine behavioral warfare with environmental mastery and a technology infrastructure that was never designed to account for either, you don't just have a breach. You have a collapse. So here's the twist. And it's one that the security industry will never put in a brochure. The greatest vulnerability in every modern security system isn't the camera angle. It isn't the sensor radius. It isn't even the power supply. It's the assumption that the system is enough. That assumption is a product of a very specific kind of thinking, one that believes complexity equals superiority. That more technology means more protection. That if a system costs enough, is sophisticated enough, is monitored closely enough, nothing can break through it. But complexity has a shadow side that simplicity never carries. Every added layer of technology is an added layer of potential failure. A wooden spear doesn't run out of battery. A warrior trained in silence doesn't lose signal. A scout who has spent 15 years reading terrain doesn't freeze when the protocol breaks down. And this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Modern security systems were stress-tested against modern threats. Hackers. Armed intruders. Organized crime. Drone surveillance. These are the scenarios that fill the training manuals and shape the system architecture. Every weakness that was found by people who think like the designers. Nobody stress-tested it against 10 warriors who haven't touched a single piece of technology in their entire lives. That's not a gap in the system. That's a canyon. There's a principle in engineering called the Chesterton's fence principle. Before you remove or redesign something, you must first understand why it was built that way. Tribal defense systems weren't built on technology because the communities understood something foundational: technology can be taken away. Knowledge cannot. You can cut a power line. You cannot cut 15 generations of embodied survival knowledge out of a warrior's muscle memory. And perhaps that is the most important thing this entire analysis leaves you with. Not that modern security is useless, it isn't. But that it was built inside a bubble. A bubble that assumes the threat will always be technological. Always be traceable. Always be afraid of what the system can do. Some threats were never afraid of it, because they never knew it existed. So here's the question worth sitting with. In a world increasingly dependent on systems, screens, and signals, what happens to human instinct? What happens to the knowledge that lives in the body rather than the cloud? Are we building stronger security, or just building higher walls around a deeper blind spot? Leave your answer in the comments. Share this with someone who thinks technology has all the answers. And if this kind of thinking challenges the way you see the world, you know what to do. Subscribe. Because the most important questions are the ones nobody is asking.